The War of the Lions was fought with swords, yet it was won with lies. History rarely remembers the righteous. It remembers the victors. When the fires at Zeakden Fortress went out, two young men walked away carrying the same trauma, but opposite convictions. One, a mercenary. The other, a specter. Ramza Beoulve tried to keep his hands clean. Delita Heiral vowed his would never be tied again. Delita learned that nobility endures, not through blood, but through belief. Where Ramza asked for permission to do good, Delita seized the power to do what was necessary. He saw how a single, well-placed lie could move a nation faster than any army. To mend a broken world, he chose to become the hero it expected, not the one it deserved. That is Delita Heiral's tragedy. Not a soul lost, but a soul sold, eyes open. Before she was a queen, Ovelia was an asset. She was a piece on the board, moved by men who called her destiny a burden they graciously carried. Delita recognized that silence. He knew the shape of that cage. They shared no blood and no title, but they shared a ghost. In Ovelia, Delita saw the shadow of his sister, Titra, another innocent standing between clashing armies, waiting to be crushed. His first defense of her was not a stratagem, but rather an instinct. He stepped between the girl and the world, driven by a desperate hope that strength could shield innocence without turning it into a prison. But the lesson of Zeakden returned. He saw the wolves circling. He saw that kindness without power is a polite form of surrender. He realized that in Ivalice, to be protected is to be owned. Delita looked at the girl who reminded him of his sister, and he chose. Protection is temporary. Control, however, is absolute. He would never be helpless again. The white stone walls of Lionel Castle did not receive a guest. It received a prisoner. Confined beneath the fortress and stripped of ceremony, Ovelia was no longer a princess. She was a problem to manage. When Delita entered her cell, he offered no comfort, only reality. Survival, he told her, was not sustained by pride. She accused him of betrayal, of trading her freedom for his ambition. Delita did not deny it. He did not defend himself. He told her only that she would be placed where she ought to be. Before the conversation could go further, the architects arrived. Cardinal Delacroix entered, followed by a knight in purple armor, Fulmar of Tengil. There was no pretense of secrecy, no attempt at mercy. Fulmar spoke plainly, dismantling Ovelia's identity piece by piece. She was not royal. She was a substitute. A doll, set in an empty cradle to preserve a political design already rotting from within. Ovelia collapsed under the weight of it. Her suffering, her lineage, her very name, rendered irrelevant in a single breath. Delita stood silent. He did not interrupt. He did not look away. He watched. Here, the church showed its truest face, not as moral authority, but as manufacturer of legitimacy. Truth was not sacred. It was optional. When the men departed, leaving Ovelia to break in the dark, Delita followed without a word. In that silence, the final lesson of Lionel hardened. Sanctuary is not protection. Sanctuary is ownership. From that moment on, Delita Heiral would never confuse the two again. Delita knew belief could be shaped. Fulmarv taught him it could be enforced. The Knight in Purple did not argue doctrine. He did not attempt to persuade. He stood as proof that faith, once armed, no longer requires consensus. Delita watched the duality. Where Delacroix curated truth, Fulmarv executed it. Delacroix offered lies so gentle they felt like mercy. Fulmarv offered nothing. Between them, the architecture of holy power lay bare. Narrative on one side, steel on the other. This was not the Church's corruption. This was the Church's refinement. Kings command armies, dukes command loyalty. The Church commands legitimacy itself. To oppose a crown is rebellion, a crime. To oppose the Church is heresy, a madness. One can be negotiated with. The other must be destroyed. Delita saw that faith did not rule because it was righteous. It ruled because it decided who was allowed to be righteous. Fulmarv did not need Ovelia to believe the lie. He needed her to occupy it. As Delita climbed from the dungeon, he mapped this new reality. To survive the world that crushed his sister, he would need to do more than play the game. He would need to decide who is allowed to stand, and who must be forced to kneel. The revelation itself was not unique. Many had seen cracks in the world, glimpses of the machinery beneath the prayers. What separated men was not what they saw, but what they did once the illusion broke. Ramza Beoulve saw the lie and turned away. He refused it. He chose conscience without protection. When legitimacy revealed itself as counterfeit, Ramza walked into obscurity rather than lend it his name. He asked how a man remains righteous within a corrupt system. Delita Heiral saw the same lie and reached for it. He understood that systems do not collapse under exposure. They adapt. He saw that innocence, once shattered, cannot be protected by honesty alone. Where Ramza sought to be good, Delita chose to be effective. If belief is inevitable, then surrendering it to others is abdication. If legitimacy is manufactured, then refusing to build it only ensures it will be built by monsters. Delita did not tell himself he was right. He told himself he was necessary. In that distinction lay the final divergence. Ramza chose to stand outside power and be broken by it. Delita chose to stand inside power and bend it, accepting the cost without hesitation. He would no longer react to the world as it was. He would decide what it was allowed to become. Power does not announce itself when it arrives. It tests. It probes for hunger, for vanity, for the soft places where obedience can take root. In the wake of Lionel, Delita offered it nothing to grasp. He did not confront the Church. He did not expose what he had seen in the dark. Instead, he positioned himself where resistance would be wasteful, and usefulness inescapable. He began solving problems before they were named. Where confusion threatened order, Delita provided clarity. Where hesitation bred fear, he provided decision. Each act was small. Each was deniable. Yet, together, they formed a pattern that could not be ignored. Men of rank began to rely on him without remembering when the reliance began. To the nobility, he was the low-born lieutenant who understood their urgency without sharing their arrogance. To the soldiers, he was proof that competence could bleed as blue as lineage. In the Church, He was something more dangerous. A variable that produced results without needing to be watched. Delita did not demand authority. He let it gather around him, drawn by the gravity of resolved crises. He learned that power is not seized through defiance, but surrendered through need. This was the lesson Lionel sharpened to a point. Legitimacy flows toward what stabilizes belief. Not what is just, not what is true. Simply what works. By the time the doors stopped closing in his face, Delita understood the cost. He was no longer protecting people. He was maintaining systems. And systems, once fed, never stop asking to eat. Power never asks for loyalty outright. It takes something quieter. Delita noticed what no longer troubled him. Decisions that once demanded reflection now resolved instantly. Lives became variables. Truth became timing. The hesitation that once marked compassion registered only as inefficiency. It did not feel like corruption. It felt like clarity. This was the price of mastery. To shape belief, he could not afford transparency. To manage legitimacy, he could not indulge empathy. Every honest explanation created vulnerability. Every unguarded moment invited chaos. Control required distance, not just from others, but from oneself. Only Ovelia remained an exception. That made her dangerous. He knew he could never give her the truth without destroying the story that protected her. If she was to survive, she had to remain a symbol. And symbols are never spared pain. This was the payment demanded in advance. Delita did not mourn what he was losing. Mourning implies regret, and regret is a luxury power does not tolerate. He simply cataloged the loss, filing it with the rest of what died at Zeakden. Friendship, innocence, the right to be understood. What remained was effectiveness. By the time he turned his eyes toward Zeltennia, he was no longer asking whether he should act. He was calculating how history would move once he did. History, he had learned, follows those willing to decide what it will cost. Zeltennia Castle was not a battlefield. It was a courtroom without laws. When Delita brought Ovelia before Duke Goltana, he did so with measured restraint. No triumph, no haste. He knelt, head bowed, posture perfect. Performative humility. A common-born lieutenant returning a stolen princess. Nothing more. Goltana watched from his seat of power. His retinue included a count whose gaze never softened, and a young scholar whose silence recorded everything. Delita presented the prisoner. He guided the confession with pauses rather than force. The accusation landed cleanly. Suspicion shifted. The room leaned in. Then he pressed further. Who gave the order? The prisoner hesitated. He asked for protection. Delita swore it, on his honor. It would be the last time that word carried meaning. The name was spoken. Chancellor Glavan. Glavan surged forward, protesting, appealing to reason. Delita allowed none of it to take root. Doubt is dangerous. Silence must be imposed before it spreads. He drew his blade. For a single heartbeat, the Thunder God's hand brushed his own hilt. Ready, then still. He did not act. That hesitation would define the war to come. Delita struck. Glavan fell where he stood. No trial, no appeal. Blood replaced argument, and the room froze. Not in horror, but in calculation. Before fear could turn inward, Delita spoke. Delay would invite retaliation. Goltana must strike first. The logic was airtight, the urgency undeniable. Orders were given, banners raised. Across the kingdom, Duke Larg answered in kind. 2 claims, 2 crowns, 2 lions staring at each other across a fractured realm. Delita did not claim command. He stepped back into the shadows as power surged forward, exactly as intended. He did not seize the kingdom. He forced it to move. The war did not wait for Delita to reflect. Orders raced outward from Zeltennia. Messengers rode through the night. Banners rose. Men began killing one another for claims they barely understood. History surged forward, hungry and indiscriminate. Delita stood at its edge, not directing the chaos, but fully aware he had released it. Zeltennia could not be undone. For the first time, Delita grasped the final shape of power. It did not arrive with coronations. It arrived with momentum. Once set in motion, it demanded constant feeding. Decisions made in silence now echoed across the kingdom in blood. Ovelia was queen in name, a symbol in practice, and a prisoner in truth. The crown she wore did not belong to her. It belonged to the belief surrounding her. A belief Delita alone maintained. To protect her, he had bound her more tightly than any cell beneath Lionel ever could. He understood the cost with a clarity that allowed no retreat. He could never confess the truth of her birth without shattering the story that kept her alive. He could never step away from the lie without allowing others to weaponize it. To preserve stability, he would have to shape belief again and again, long after the justification had curdled into habit. This was the crown's demand: permanence. No absolution, no release, no return to the boy who played the reed flute. Delita did not mourn what was lost. Mourning belonged to men who could still afford regret. He accepted the cost as he had accepted every other lesson since Zeakden, without flinching, without illusion. The kingdom now moved because he had moved it. And from this moment on, it would never stop asking him to do so again. Delita did not merely take a throne at Zeltennia. He did something more consequential. He taught the kingdom what to believe. From that moment on, Ivalice moved according to stories shaped in quiet rooms. Crowns rose and fell, armies marched, and blood was spilled in the name of truths that were never examined, only repeated. Delita understood this mechanism better than anyone. Ramza Beoulve saw the truth and chose exile, believing conscience mattered more than consequence. Delita saw the same truth and chose control, believing consequence mattered more than purity. One walked away from history. The other authored it. Neither choice was clean. Neither was free. The tragedy of Delita is not that he became cruel. It is that he became indispensable. Once the war began, there was no place left for honesty, only for management. No space for innocence, only for symbols strong enough to survive. Delita did not betray the world. He accepted it. And in doing so, he ensured that when the War of the Lions was remembered, history would not ask who was right. It would ask who made it inevitable. Delita Heiral already knew the answer.